I had never truly understood the weight of the word anxiety until it began to overshadow every aspect of my life. Like an enemy I never saw coming, an ever present python that refused to release its grip. It wasn't just a fleeting worry or nervousness, it was a relentless force that consumed me, leaving me vulnerable and terrified. The symptoms were intense and unfamiliar, making it impossible for me to be alone without a sense of dread taking over. It wasn't long before these feelings spiraled into full-blown panic attacks. I later learned that what I was experiencing was rooted in health anxiety, specifically a paralyzing fear of dying. This fear became the lens through which I viewed the world, and it tightened its grip on me each time I saw headlines about young people dying suddenly, particularly due to the COVID-19 vaccine. The idea that death could strike at any moment became an obsession, and my mind fixated on it. My inner child, with its tender fears and deep-seated need for safety, couldn't dismiss these thoughts. The anxiety fed on my emotions and attachments, growing stronger with each passing day. The fear of dying alone, unnoticed, became a haunting thought that echoed in my mind. It wasn't just the fear of death itself, but the idea of fading away without anyone realizing, without anyone there to comfort or save me. Happiness eluded me. Nothing could lift my spirits. Even during celebrations, I would feel a deep sadness because I knew that after the party was over, I would be right back in that dark pit of anxiety. I could not stand being alone, so I would constantly reach out to friends, begging them to stay with me. But of course, they couldn't always be there, and when they left, the loneliness hit me like a ton of bricks. Not even holidays or festivities could fill the void. This was the depth of my struggle with health anxiety. It became my routine, my reality. As these thoughts consumed me, my body began to react in ways that only fueled my anxiety. Every time I sensed the slightest hint of a panic attack, I would rush to the emergency room, desperate for reassurance that my heart was still functioning properly. I went to the emergency room over 20 times, yet I was never truly convinced. The more I went, the less relief I felt, as the doctor's reassurances began to feel hollow. Despite countless tests and examinations, my fears persisted, and each visit to the emergency room only reinforced my belief that something was horribly wrong. I found myself trapped in a vicious cycle. I became obsessed with checking my pulse, and even the slightest increase in heart rate would send me into a tailspin of anxiety, triggering yet another panic attack. The more I checked, the more anxious I became, and the cycle continued. I was always on high alert, mentally prepared to run to the emergency room at a moment's notice. I became so familiar with the routine that the staff started to recognize me, and some even began to laugh at my frequent visits. Doctors started to laugh at my frequent emergency room visits, dismissing me as a hypochondriac. But one senior doctor took the time to understand what I was going through. He diagnosed me with anxiety and prescribed beta blockers to control my racing heartbeat. For the first time, I had a name for what was happening to me, anxiety. It was both a revelation and relief. The beta blockers helped, but I became dependent on them, using them as a crutch to stave off the panic attacks. It was as if I was constantly walking a tightrope, balancing between my fear of dying and the medication that kept that fear at bay. Then, one fine day, I reached out to my childhood friend, Mahendra, who is a wise and experienced pulmonologist working in a government hospital. I poured out my heart to him, explaining the depths of my fear and the toll it was taking on me. Mahendra listened patiently and then offered me some life-changing advice. He urged me to stop searching for remedies on the internet, noting from his experience that it only serves to heighten the fears of those with health anxiety. Instead, he recommended that I start practicing meditation and make some lifestyle changes, particularly in my diet. After talking with Mahendra, I felt a sense of relief, but the anxiety did not completely disappear. It lingered, clinging to me like a stubborn shadow. I carried this burden for almost a year. Then, a change in my life circumstances forced me to relocate to a place far from where I had lived for the past decade. Surprisingly, this change in environment marked the beginning of my healing. As Mahendra had advised, I began searching for a meditation practice that resonated with me. I tapped into my childhood memories of practicing yoga and meditation. Fortunately, I recalled a technique that made perfect sense. It was a method introduced by Yogi Raghavendra Swami in one of his books, which I had learned from his successors at an ashram when I was just 13 years old. This meditation was unlike anything I had tried before. It involved disconnecting from both the body and the mind and simply existing as pure awareness. The key was to become a passive observer, watching the activities of the body and mind from a distance without getting personally involved, without getting personally entangled. Just as the sky accommodates various weather conditions, be it storms, rain, or sunshine, it remains untouched and calm once the weather passes. Similarly, our being, our true essence, remains pure and undisturbed despite the turmoil of mind and body. The idea was to become a witness, an observer of whatever was going on in your body and mind without getting caught up in it. It was like watching a movie. You see the drama unfold, but you don't take it personally. You just let it play out. The yogi's instructions were clear. Do not pay attention to the mind or body. Whatever happens, ignore it and simply sit in stillness. I realized that the mind and body are just parts of a larger canvas, and the real essence of life lies in our being, which accommodates these parts without being affected by them, without being entangled by them. The mind and body are like actors on a stage, playing their roles, while our being is the audience, watching without getting involved. When we observe someone running, we don't get tired. We only tire ourselves out if we start running too. So I choose to be the observer, not the runner. This approach was exactly what I needed. The practice of simply observing, of being a detached witness. This brought me a sense of peace I hadn't known before. This shift in perspective was a turning point for me. It was like stepping out of a chaotic storm and finding shelter in a quiet, serene place. With this realization, my need to visit the emergency room vanished. It's been over 5 years since I last stepped foot in a hospital. Now I can go anywhere alone, drive any distance by myself, and even entertain the idea of venturing into the Amazon forest or facing the danger of African cannibals. I am that confident. Meditation has become my new emergency room. Looking back, I see that this anxiety was a blessing in disguise. The universe was preparing me for something greater, a spiritual awakening, an enlightenment that has transformed me into a new person living in a different dimension of timeless joy.